Okay, well, this is my, if you like, part two of my guide to Hex Flower game engines. I've already done a part one. I'm kind of doing a walkthrough, if you like, of my guide, the Hex Flower Cookbook, which is you can find on drive-through, pay what you want. So if you've missed part one, then maybe want to go back and listen, watch that. But essentially, in part one, I covered the first few pages of my guide, which most importantly in that first episode you covered um, the hex flower game engine, or rather the anatomy of it. You have the hex flower, which dictates how the events that you might want to have in your, if you like, random table are arranged relative to each other, and the navigation hex, which determines how you, if you like, move around this board. Okay, so I kind of created a bunch of fake classes for different kinds of hex flowers because I found the document kind of difficult to write. I just found it helpful to sort of break these down into different kinds of examples. So this is the first example I sort of came up with when I was experimenting with these hex flower game engines. Um, Now I should probably say that I didn't invent this concept really, but what I did do, I think, which was new, was to add edge rules, but we'll come back to that later. And also I think a probability distribution to move around it. Anyway, so this is basically kind of an example of what I talked about before. This is what I'm calling the infinite game. So essentially, this is a kind of a hex value that you might want to use when there is no control by the players. Really, it's kind of just generating a series of sort of encounters or whatever it might be. Um, I think it's just easy to do an example. So this is a terrain generator, and this is pretty much the first hexflower game engine I came up with. And the idea here is that the bottom hexes represent low-lying terrain, and it gets woody this way, it gets dry this way, and here are the mountains right at the top, and around the bottom there are some hills. Now it must be emphasized this is not a map, this is a game engine. So typically, you might imagine if you started, you left the city and you were on plains, then you'd roll your 2d6 to navigate. So you know your players, whoever they might be, decide to set out, and they set out from the city, and they roll a 12. They get some plains, and then let's say they rolled a 3, they might get some trees, and so on and so forth. And just to re-emphasize the probability distribution, because the probability is mainly down, I put the most common outcomes at the bottom and the least common outcomes at the top. So if you were to use this, you'd mainly get a lot of plains, you get some, infrequently you get some hills, and then very rarely you should get some mountains. Now, later on I'll discuss edge rules, which you can sort of see here, which add a bit more sort of dynamism to the situation. Um, I apologize for the fan of my laptop. I don't know what it's doing. It seems to be going a bit mental. So let's just take might as well just take a closer look at this. So um, yeah, here we go. Might as well crack into the probability a little bit. So as I was talking about, this navigation hex has an intrinsic probability to it because it's using 2d6. I've kind of arranged it in a clock. This is a typical one I use for navigation hexes. It's sort of arranged intuitively in a clock face, 12 up, 6 down. But because of the way the probability works with using 2d6, the probability is mainly down and this way. So when you're setting up your hex value, you need to sort of think about that probability in mind if you're going to use that kind of situation. Now, just to mix things up, I also include edge rules, which means that if you go off the edge of a hex, you carry on to the adjacent, if you like, row or the column in the same line. So that allows you to really, as a bit of a wild card element, so that you don't just get trapped in the bottom here. And to prevent you getting kind of weird results, what you can do is you can add in these kind of things here, which stop you like going from mountains straight to plains, or plains straight to mountains. So these block off the sort of weirder results. And you can add arrows if you want to simplify things too.